Hey all, so this is war number 8 against Legion, pretty big one, they tend to play quite well, and I have a slightly different team today. As you can see, I'm bringing Masacre because he actually lined up really well for a number of fights. Obviously, I took quite a few fights in the off-season with him, but this is the first time actually bringing him into something where the points matter. So we start off against this Kingpin here. Definitely a difficult placement because basically you use like House of X with somebody who doesn't place debuffs, which there aren't a ton that really counter Kingpin, or you bring Apocalypse. But the problem with Apocalypse is that he's not going to shrug any debuffs, including his own, and thus his combat power rate is going to go up and up and up. And when you combine that with efficiency, if Kingpin decides to be, stingy, it's easy to get backed into our corner, as just happened. The good news is that, we do plenty of damage on these. With the mutant power backs, we get a fair amount there. So it's not that bad, but definitely have to slow play, definitely have to start baiting almost instantly, really pay attention to spacing. Honestly, I probably could have thrown the special 2 right there, or even a combo before, and assumed it pretty much finished him off. He's not going to go into overpower, so the thing is that even if we push him to his special 2, we can always block it. It's never going to be unblockable, so that's a huge advantage that Apocalypse has there. Don't love using a completely unramped Apocalypse against annoying defenders, but at the same time, that's the benefit of having him at rank 4, right? So next up we have Mordo on Vivified here, and I'm going to go ahead and throw a Petrification Ray on because I don't want his own power gain to shoot him red or to somewhere else that I'm not ready for too much. But I'm also kind of assuming I'm going to lose it, and basically my plan of attack here is I'm just going to push him red repeatedly. Because the first time he goes red, he's going to place a Careful Study debuff on himself for the special 3 when he launches it, and then because special 3s always land, he will also place a second one. Which means that that special 3, even if we had not used an invulnerability boost, and even if we were not running the special 3 defense boost, would only do half damage. Instead, of course, we're running an invulnerability, so the first one does nothing at all. Now, after this special 3, I felt like my controls just didn't respond at all. So, there goes the rest of my invulnerability. Don't love that. Same time, not the end of the world, because the reason our plan is to push him red immediately again is that now when he throws this, he's going to get the third Careful Study debuff and turn it into a passive. And so this special 3 does 75% less and 33% less because of the special 3 defense. Now, I'm not entirely sure what order those apply in, but as you saw, that was a Mordo with 4 Furies, landed a special 3 against me without invulnerability up, and it did 2% of my health. So the rest of this fight is still moderately annoying. It is Mordo, we can't parry freely, we do have to worry about brute force a little bit, some other controls things, but at the end of the day, the scariest thing about this node, them just going red over and over and over again, is not really a concern. So feel really, really good about using Reed there, and it's kind of fun to dust off the special 3 defense boosts for someone who can really capitalize on them. So then we have Super Skrull here, and basically it's going to be a Defiance versus Power Snack fight. We just need to watch for his falter. Now there are a couple other things that could happen. He could go unblockable. We would have to wait that out, and we might lose our debuffs. If that happens, it's not the end of the world because it's still a Defiance attacker, and so he's not going to gain that power, shoot up to a special 2, and throw it into our block. That's kind of my fail case here, is that even if everything else goes wrong, I can just sit here and wait. And that's the beautiful thing about using the pre-fights here is that even if we lose the first set, we can reapply them with the special 2. Now, as you can see, 2 of those heavies now have released late. Maybe that was on me. I'm really not sure. Don't love the feeling there. Now, ideally what I would do here is I would intercept him, he would throw a heavy, something along those lines, and I would push to my special 1, land that, and then throw it before the falter comes back, refresh all of my debuffs. Obviously that did not happen. He threw a heavy in the corner where I'm not able to evade it. Not the best turn in the fight. But he's going to go ahead and throw this here. We are going to hit in. We have our debuffs back up. We have enough debuffs on him that Despair is, turning around any healing. The fight has definitely just slowed down because we lost access to a lot of damage when we lost those debuffs, but it's not dangerous in any way. Now here's another thing that we could have done and should have done as I'm watching this back. Notice that the 5 armor ups from his special 1 had almost expired when I hit into him to give him his 5th buff that then took him into overcharge, which is when the unblockable gets calculated. That means that if I had waited a split second longer, if I had just been a little bit less aggressive, I could have waited out those buffs, let them expire entirely, and not procced the unblockable there. Which probably means that there was a window the first time for me to do the same thing. Lay back, let the buffs expire, and still be able to land a heavy to refresh my debuffs without sending him unblockable. So next time I'm going to really pay attention to that. But the good news, as we've said a few times, is that because we have the Defiance tactic, this is just very safe. It's not going to spiral out of control. Now, I do just want to say, if this were a very high sig duped Skrull, and he had that very powerful power gain when he's in overcharge, this could have been a little bit scarier when I lost the debuffs. I think it still would have been very winnable. We just might have been talking about Reed's careful study debuff applying to the special 2 and reducing its damage and his evade chance instead of some of the other things that we talked about. But I am glad that I got to try this on an unduped Skrull, learn the lesson about how to time things to play around the unblockable, so that if I take this in the future, I think that I can completely avoid the unblockable, maintain the debuffs, and even though he'll gain a little bit of power at the beginning, as soon as we get the first special 2, it basically ceases to exist. So, very good matchup going forward. Now, speaking of good matchups, Masacre is one of my favorite I-Hulk counters in the entire game, because he just does an absolute ton of damage over time as soon as he gets those incinerates up. Another niche aspect of Masacre is that when you throw his special 2 into block and it does all that damage, none of that is converted into Gamma. Technically, at that time, I-Hulk is not being struck, and therefore none of that damage gets converted. Now, Despair is not working for us in this fight because I-Hulk is immune to modifications of his ability accuracy, and so in hindsight, not sure that the special 1 was actually the right move, because yes, it refreshed our incinerates, which does help, but it also put 2 other debuffs on the opponent, and the bleeds are pretty weak and the disorient does no damage at all. Now here's the big mistake. For some reason, in my head, I was like, alright, I-Hulk special 2 is 2 dexes, which is true, but it's 3 hits. And so I blocked those 2 hits, and then I was like, alright, time to hit him. Very, very stupid. I got incredibly lucky. That could have gone so much worse if he had done a full 5-hit combo. Lesson learned. I'm going to be a lot more careful about that special 2 next time. I don't regret baiting the special 2, because if you bait the special 1 a lot, then this happens, and he heals, and I think he probably would have gone Immortal. As it is, we just sneak that 15 Gamma in under the wire, and we get him down without him going Immortal. I am not running any points in Pacify or the Assassin Mastery, so that was just the Gamma. But I think if you play that a little bit differently, you go for the special 2, you make that your plan of attack for dealing a lot of damage, none of which goes to Gamma, you don't throw the special 1, and you make sure that if you decide to block the special 2, you block the whole thing, then it's a very easy fight. So moving on to Iron Man Infinity War here, basically we are going to try and keep up the debuffs, but we also don't really need them. He's Defiant, so Buffet is not going to be a concern, and Iron Man doesn't really have any resistance to our Incinerates. He does have some crit resistance, which is why we need to make sure that we're hitting into the block, because we're going to get fewer of the ignition charges from just landing combos, but that's really easy to get around. And also, as soon as we get him into the corner, the suppression pre-fight, reducing his combat power rate, lets us do fun things like that, where we threw 3 heavies in a row against the wall and just locked in a ton of damage. Now, if he had come right in at us then, we could have thrown a special 1 and refreshed all of those. Not the end of the world that we did not. We got another chance to back him up, throw a bunch of heavies, even though he was in that final state, and the Petrify pre-fight was keeping the power gain from his SIG slow enough that we could still land heavies, lock in more Incinerates. Masacre just does a ton of damage. Defiance really makes him extremely flexible. So now we have this Dragon Man on Polka Dot Power. Good placement because he is poison immune. There are not a ton of champions that apply Incinerate, especially not a ton that can get around Mystic Dispersion easily. And so, oftentimes, you just can't stun him. So Nebula is a very common answer here. Spider-Man 2099, if he's not banned, can reverse the power gain and just do a bunch of Rupture. Both very good. But I did use Masacre in the off-season and decided to use him here. So right now what you're seeing is a duel, and that's just because before I headed in, I know for a fact that after his Special 1 and Special 2, almost anyone can heavy counter Dragon Man. That was going to be easy. And so that was going to let me get in my ignition charges, that was going to let me reignite, that was going to let me land Incinerates. But what I wanted to watch was how reliable is landing the heavy after his heavy. Because that's probably going to be the very first one I throw, and it may be really important to reigniting, like you just saw there. And so that's why I did this duel, and what you're seeing is, it's pretty darn reliable. This fight would be totally safe if you could only throw the heavy after his specials, but the fact that you can also throw it after his heavies just gives you a ton of openings to apply Incinerates, and then in the actual fight, what you're going to be able to do is then stun him after you've incinerated him and the shield goes down. You're going to be able to take advantage of the stun vulnerability and just do a ton of damage that way. So let's head in. We do have the pre-fights on from Reed because there is always a chance that he just decides to be a jerk and goes straight to his Special 3. And we're trying to minimize that. We heal up the block damage we took from Iron Man, and we head on in. Basic plan is to get ignited quickly, land a heavy for a bunch of Incinerates, and then turn off his power charge as quickly as we can. So there I didn't throw the heavy because I wanted to go for short combos. The heavy can bait out the special, knockdowns can do that, but I was hoping that just hitting him with short combos was going to get him to throw his specials. Then I threw the heavy, because often that does get him to throw specials, hit into his block, stay really open, and you know what? He just really wanted to throw his Special 3. So that's annoying. But we know that because he only had the 1 power charge, he's only going to be unstoppable for 4 seconds. And he's going to be unblockable for less than that. We are in the corner, but we can survive this. We only had to actually dodge 1, and then because us because we had gotten ignited, because we were gaining power from polka dot power, we had that special one to throw. Even though the bleeds don't do anything, that still prevented us from having to worry about nailing the heavy evade in the corner. We got out of the corner, we got reignited. We're back in control here. So now we can parry him to remove the power charge. This heavy does a lot of damage. The incinerates that are landed under the stun do even more. We feel fine here. Keep removing the shield every time he throws a special because there are easy openings for heavies. Go ahead, and I think I throw this? Yes. And that's plenty. So, would have been a cleaner fight if he had thrown any specials before his first special 3. Definitely annoying that he did that, but still I think a very safe option as long as you know how to dance after. So this one right here, we got a bit of a problem. Some of you will have already picked up on it, and that is just that I made a planning error. We had enough Magneto House of X's for me to have a pre-fight here for the passive stun to get around Limber. Apocalypse is already disorient immune. I would have had all the stuns that I needed. I could have thrown a heavy there very easily and refreshed the Mr. Fantastic pre-fights, completely avoided the aura, and blunted Mystic Dispersion for the entire fight. But I made the mistake of not marking either of those Magnetos to come over here. I told them that either one of them could go to the other side of Boss Island, and the one of them that I should have assigned to me did, and then the other one could not follow. And so I have to take this much, much harder fight with Apocalypse. Like, Apocalypse is fantastic. It's great that he doesn't get hit by the disorient here, so he can block if he needs to. But this is just not a fight that you would ever assign. Like, if you're not going to do this with the House of X pre-fight, then you send an Immortal Abomination. You send something else, not this. And so this was a serious miscalculation on my part, but I also cut out the part where I looked over the entire map before coming in here to see if there were basically any safe alternatives, and there weren't. Now, maybe I could have or even should have done this with Reed himself, and even though I wouldn't have been able to keep up the pre-fights, I do think that I would have just been able to block, bait heavies, probably bait out enough special ones to get my careful studies up. I wouldn't have used any pre-fights at all, so I would have had unblockable specials to help manage brute force. I actually think that that is worth testing in the off-season, but I was thinking that rank 4 Apocalypse with the power back boosts was still the better option here. You can see that we are winning the HP race, but not by a ton. This definitely would already be over if our Apocalypse was rank 4, and then you can see I have to get that intercept because we did have enough health to block the special 2, we did not have enough health to block the special 2, and then take a bunch of brute force. Barely survive baiting that heavy, his aura goes down just in time for us to throw the special 1, and thankfully this was a learning experience and a teachable moment, and not a death. So yeah, I don't know what it'll accomplish, but if anyone wants to call me stupid in the comments, I won't disagree with you this time. Anyway, lesson heartily learned for next time. I really cannot believe I didn't catch that in going over the plan. But from there, the boss went down smoothly, extremely smoothly. It was one of the fastest boss kills I've ever seen. Thank you, clown. But we did end up losing this war. They played pretty tight, and we had one of those, I'm not going to talk about where, but we just had one of those where a lot of really solid players just had oopses all on the same day. And, you know, that happens, and sometimes when that happens, it happens against a good opponent, and you lose the war. Not the end of the world. We are still in Masters going forward. We'll just close out this last week. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm really glad I finally got to bring Masacre to war. That was just an absolute blast for me. And until next time, thanks so much for watching, and take care.